Something has changed in the unseen realm, but you may be noticing it first in the natural. What once had power over you suddenly begins to lose its grip. So, what happens when the attack can no longer control you? Why do old patterns suddenly break, certain doors close, and the atmosphere around you begin to change? Today, we are exposing 5 strange signs that may reveal that what fought you is losing its influence and your spiritual awakening has already begun. One of the first strange things you may notice when spiritual oppression loses its influence is this: the fear that once controlled you begins to weaken. You still remember what happened. You remember the nights when your mind would race for no obvious reason. You remember waking suddenly and feeling uneasy. You remember entering certain rooms and sensing something was wrong. You remember constantly expecting bad news, disappointment, conflict, or some unexplained disaster. But then something changes. The same situation happens, and you are not afraid anymore. The same thought appears, and it does not control your emotions. The same memory tries to return, and instead of collapsing under it, you begin to recognize it for what it is: fear. This is significant because fear can become a prison long before you realize you are living inside one. Fear tells you to stop. Fear tells you that something terrible is coming. Fear convinces you that you are being watched, targeted, rejected, abandoned, or defeated. And when fear dominates your thinking, you can begin making decisions based on what you are afraid might happen instead of what you know to be true. But when that grip begins to break, your response changes. You become calmer. You become more discerning. You stop reacting to every uncomfortable feeling as though it is a supernatural warning. You begin asking better questions. Instead of saying, "What is attacking me?" you begin asking, "What is actually happening? And how should I respond with wisdom and faith?" That is a powerful shift. And you need to understand something important. Not every frightening sensation, bad dream, headache, coincidence, or difficult season is proof of witchcraft or a demonic attack. Sometimes anxiety is anxiety. Sometimes exhaustion is exhaustion. Sometimes stress is stress. Sometimes a difficult relationship is simply a difficult relationship. Spiritual maturity requires discernment because fear can make ordinary problems look supernatural. That is why your freedom should not be built on suspicion, it should be built on truth. Imagine someone who once avoided certain places because they associated them with painful experiences. Months later, they return. Nothing magical happens, but something inside them has changed. They realize they are no longer controlled by the memory. They can breathe, they can think, they can pray, they can walk forward. That is what freedom can look like. Not always thunder, not always dramatic signs. Sometimes freedom arrives quietly. You simply realize that the thing that used to terrify you no longer owns your attention. And when fear loses its authority, you begin recovering something incredibly valuable: your ability to think clearly. You stop obsessively searching for hidden enemies. You stop interpreting every coincidence as a warning. You stop giving every person unlimited power over your emotions. You stop allowing yesterday's pain to dictate tomorrow's decisions. This is where your faith must become stronger than your fear. You do not need to spend every morning searching for evidence that someone is fighting you. You need to become grounded, pray, write scriptures, seek wise counsel, take care of your mind and body, set healthy boundaries, and when something genuinely threatens your peace or safety, respond wisely rather than impulsively. Because victory is not living terrified of spiritual opposition. Victory is becoming so rooted in truth that fear no longer dictates your life. So, if you have noticed something strange lately, if the panic is decreasing, if the obsession is fading, if you are finally sleeping more peacefully, if you can face situations that once terrified you without collapsing, do not automatically assume something mysterious is happening. Recognize the possibility that you are becoming stronger. Your mind is becoming steadier. Your faith is becoming deeper. And the thing that once controlled your reactions may no longer have the same authority over you. That is where the battle begins to look different. Because when fear loses its grip, you stop fighting from desperation. You start standing from conviction. And that changes everything. There is another strange change you may notice when you begin walking in greater freedom. Patterns that once seemed impossible to escape suddenly start losing their control over you. You may have repeated the same cycle for years, the same kind of relationship, the same destructive decision, the same emotional reaction, the same temptation, the same self sabotage, the same fear. You promised yourself never again. Then somehow you found yourself standing in the same place again and again and again. That repetition can make you believe something is permanently wrong with you. But what if the cycle can be broken? What if the first evidence of freedom is not that everything around you changes instantly, but that you begin responding differently? You encounter the same temptation, but you walk away. You receive the same insult, but you refuse to retaliate. You feel the same urge to return to an unhealthy situation, but something inside you says, no more. You recognize the pattern before it completes itself. That is powerful because freedom often begins with recognition. You cannot confront a pattern you refuse to acknowledge. And this is where spiritual discernment becomes extremely important. You should not automatically label every repeated problem as witchcraft. Sometimes destructive patterns come from wounds. Sometimes they come from habits. Sometimes they come from unhealthy environments. Sometimes they come from choices we have repeated for so long that they feel automatic. And sometimes people use spiritual language to avoid taking responsibility for practical changes they need to make. Real freedom requires both faith and responsibility. If a relationship is destroying your peace, prayer does not mean you must remain without boundaries. If a habit is damaging your life, faith does not mean you refuse to seek help. If your thoughts are constantly overwhelming you, spiritual practices can coexist with professional support. Godly wisdom does not demand that you ignore reality. It teaches you to face reality with courage. Think about someone who constantly believed they would fail. Every opportunity came with the same internal voice. You are not ready. You will embarrass yourself. You will lose everything. You should not even try. For years, they obeyed that voice. Then one day they make a different decision. They apply, they speak, they start, they try. Maybe they fail, but they discover something they never knew before. Failure did not destroy them, and suddenly the fear loses some of its power. That is what breaking a pattern can look like. It may not feel supernatural, it may look like a small decision. But small decisions repeated over time can completely transform a life. This is why you must pay attention to what is changing inside you. Are you becoming more disciplined? Are you becoming more honest? Are you setting boundaries where you once tolerated everything? Are you walking away from environments that constantly pull you backward? Are you becoming less reactive? Are you choosing prayer instead of panic? Are you choosing wisdom instead of suspicion? Are you choosing forgiveness without returning to unhealthy relationships? These are not insignificant changes. They can be evidence that you are no longer allowing your past to dictate your future. And here is the warning: do not celebrate freedom while continuing to feed the same chains. If you believe you have escaped a destructive cycle, do not keep returning to the doorway. Do not keep entertaining what you know weakens you. Do not keep reopening conversations that repeatedly destroy your peace. Do not keep feeding resentment and then wonder why you cannot move forward. Freedom requires maintenance. Your spiritual life needs discipline. Your mind needs truth. Your relationships need boundaries. Your choices need wisdom. And your faith needs action. You do not prove that a chain is broken by staring at it. You prove it by walking forward. So, if old patterns have suddenly begun losing their power, pay attention. Maybe you are not becoming colder. Maybe you are becoming wiser. Maybe you are not becoming distant. Maybe you are learning boundaries. Maybe you are not losing people. Maybe you are finally losing the need to be controlled by them. And perhaps the strangest sign of all is this: you are beginning to choose differently, even when nobody is watching. That is where real transformation begins. There is another change people often describe when they believe they are entering a new season of freedom. The atmosphere around them begins to feel different. The room feels calmer. Their thoughts feel quieter. They no longer walk through the day expecting something terrible to happen. The tension, that once seemed permanent begins to fade. And sometimes this change is so subtle that you almost miss it. You wake up one morning and realize you slept through the night. You sit alone without feeling overwhelmed. You enter your home and actually feel comfortable. You stop checking every sound. You stop searching for hidden meanings in every event. You begin breathing normally again, and you realize something has changed. But hear this carefully. Not every strange feeling in a room is evidence of witchcraft. Not every unusual sound is a spiritual attack. Not every unpleasant smell means something supernatural is present. Not every difficult atmosphere has a demonic explanation. Your senses can respond to stress, memories, conflict, exhaustion, environmental changes, and many ordinary causes. That is why discernment matters. Spiritual warfare should never become an excuse to abandon wisdom. Instead, your faith should make you more grounded. If something in your environment genuinely concerns you, investigate it, check yours, check surroundings, speak with someone trustworthy, address practical problems. And if you are experiencing persistent fear, sleep problems, or disturbing sensations, consider whether stress or another health related issue could be contributing. You do not weaken your faith by seeking answers. You strengthen your wisdom. Now, consider what happens when the source of your distress, whether spiritual, emotional, relational, or psychological, begins losing its influence. Your environment may not literally change, but your relationship with that environment changes. The same house feels different because you feel different. The same neighborhood does not intimidate you anymore. The same conversation no longer controls your emotions. The same person can provoke you, but you no longer surrender your peace to their behavior. That is a major victory because sometimes the greatest prison is not the room, it is the interpretation you have attached to the room. If you believe you are constantly under attack, every unexpected event becomes evidence. A car passes your house, you become suspicious. Someone looks at you strangely. You assume they are against you. You have a bad dream. You believe it must carry a supernatural message. You experience a difficult day. You conclude that someone has spiritually targeted you. And slowly, your entire world becomes organized around fear. That is not freedom. Freedom means you can recognize uncertainty without immediately turning it into terror. You can say, I do not know why this happened, and still remain peaceful. You can say, I need more information, and still remain faithful. You can say, this situation concerns me, and respond wisely instead of becoming consumed by fear. That kind of stability is powerful. Imagine walking into a place that once triggered anxiety and realizing you can pray, breathe, think, and live without being emotionally destroyed. Imagine hearing something unsettling and refusing to spend the next 6 hours imagining the worst possible explanation. Imagine waking from a disturbing dream and choosing not to let it dictate your entire day. That is maturity. That is discernment. That is emotional strength. And if you are experiencing this shift, do not become obsessed with proving that something supernatural has happened. Focus on the fruit. Are you becoming more peaceful, more self controlled, more courageous, more grounded, more compassionate, more disciplined, more willing to confront reality? Those changes matter far more than dramatic theories, because genuine spiritual growth should produce greater clarity, not greater paranoia, greater courage, not constant fear, greater wisdom, not endless suspicion. So when the atmosphere feels different, pause. Do not immediately panic. Do not immediately declare victory either. Observe, pray, test what you are experiencing. Look at the facts. Pay attention to what is happening inside you. And keep moving toward truth, because sometimes the greatest evidence that a dark season is ending is not that the world suddenly becomes perfect. It is that you are no longer controlled by everything that once frightened you. And when that happens, you have recovered something precious: peace. Not because life has become completely predictable, but because your heart has learned that uncertainty does not have to control you. One of the most powerful signs that a destructive season is losing its influence is this: you stop organizing your entire life around what happened to you. You still remember, you still know what you survived, you still recognize the pain, but you are no longer living there. For a long time, you may have asked the same questions: who did this to me? Why did this happen? Was someone working against me? Why did my life become so difficult? Why did everything fall apart? Those questions can consume years. And there comes a moment when you have to make a decision. You can continue looking backward for an explanation, or you can begin building forward with wisdom. This does not mean ignoring what happened. It does not mean pretending betrayal did not hurt. It does not mean refusing to acknowledge injustice. It means refusing to let yesterday become the permanent authority over tomorrow. There is a difference between remembering your battle and worshiping your battle. You can learn from the past without living inside it. You can forgive without pretending nothing happened. You can establish boundaries without carrying hatred. You can become cautious without becoming paranoid. And you can strengthen your faith without becoming obsessed with spiritual enemies. That distinction matters, because fear can keep you looking backward. It can convince you that the person who hurt you still controls you. It can make you believe that every setback is connected to the same old attack. It can cause you to interpret every disappointment through the lens of your worst seasons. But eventually, you must say, this will not define the rest of my life. That sentence can become a turning point. Imagine someone who spent years believing they could never succeed because their past had been filled with rejection. Every opportunity reminded them of previous failures. Every new relationship reminded them of betrayal. Every financial challenge reminded them of previous losses. They were technically moving forward, but emotionally they were still standing in yesterday. Then something changes. They start learning, they start rebuilding, they stop allowing one person's opinion to define their worth. They stop waiting for everyone who hurt them to apologize. They stop demanding that the past makes sense before they permit themselves to live. And suddenly, their future becomes bigger than their history. That is what you should pursue, not revenge, not endless investigation, not obsession with hidden enemies. Freedom. And freedom requires you to protect what you are rebuilding. Do not return to environments that repeatedly destroy your stability. Do not reopen doors simply because you feel lonely. Do not confuse forgiveness with access. Do not confuse compassion with tolerating manipulation. Do not confuse spiritual warfare with refusing practical wisdom. If someone is genuinely threatening you, seek appropriate help. If a relationship is abusive, establish safety and boundaries. If your mental or physical health is suffering, seek qualified professional care. Faith and wisdom are not enemies. They can work together. Your prayer life should make you courageous enough to take wise action. And this is where the final transformation happens. You stop waking up asking, what is coming against me? You start waking up asking, what am I going to build today? You stop asking, who is watching me? You start asking, what responsibility has God placed in my hands? You stop asking, how do I defeat every enemy? You start asking, how do I become the person I was created to become? That shift is enormous because the enemy of your progress does not always need to destroy you. Sometimes all it needs to do is keep you distracted, keep you afraid, keep you suspicious, keep you looking backward, keep you endlessly analyzing yesterday while tomorrow passes unnoticed. So refuse to live there. Pray, stand firm, use wisdom, build healthy relationships, strengthen your mind, take responsibility for your decisions, relish what you cannot control, and keep moving. If witchcraft has been part of the way you understand your past, do not let that belief become another prison. Your future should not depend on identifying every person you think opposed you. Your future should be built on truth, wisdom, faith, discipline, and courageous action. You do not need to know every hidden detail of yesterday to walk confidently into tomorrow. Sometimes the greatest sign that you are free is in simple. You stop looking for the enemy everywhere. You stop feeding fear. You stop rehearsing old pain. You stop waiting for another attack. And you finally begin living, not recklessly, not blindly, but with discernment, with courage, with faith, with your eyes forward, because your life is bigger than the season that wounded you, and your future deserves more attention than your past ever received. That is where real freedom becomes visible. You are not called to live permanently under fear, suspicion, or the wounds of your past. Stand firm in truth, guard your peace, and refuse to surrender your mind to what you cannot control. What tried to dominate your life does not have to define your future. Walk forward with wisdom, courage, prayer, and unwavering faith. The season of fear does not get the final word. You do. Rise, stand firm, and move forward in victory.